Join. It looks like people are still joining, so we'll give them another minute or two, and then we'll get started. I will say, I'll throw in the chat, maybe links. So I'll be talking mostly about things that are already on the website today. So one of those is a list of proposal development services that I'm putting in the chat. And I'll also talk a little bit about our limited submissions policy, which I know many of you have engaged with the limited submission process, but we did recently actually post our official policy on the website. That may change with time, but that's it for now. Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to start on time. And if people filter in, they can watch the recording later. Hopefully this won't take a full hour. So first of all, I'm Jackie Weissman. Many of you have probably already interacted with me at some point, but I'm the Assistant Director for Proposal Development, at least for now, at City College. In my role, I am here to basically help you get funding, but not necessarily from the administrative side. So when you submit your grant through grants and sponsors programs, they're going to be the ones who really help you check everything for compliance, make sure you have the right documents, actually do the submission. And my job really comes in a little bit earlier than that and thinking about how you target specific programs and think strategically about how you craft your proposal. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like today. This is a relatively new role for City College. I've only been here for about 6 months now, since the summer. And so if we haven't had a chance to work together yet, I encourage you to reach out. So I'll cover proposal development services here. I'll sort of remind you of the typical proposal development timeline. I'll talk a little bit about the limited submission process because I do run that process, and so I'd like to just remind people of how it works. And then I'll briefly talk about at least one tool we have access to at City College for finding opportunities. And if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it as I'm going through. This is a glossary I have. I probably will just explain stuff as it comes up, but if you're not familiar with these terms, you may want to just take a picture of this, or I can distribute the slides afterwards. But I'm not going to go through the terms right now. So there's really so I work on any kind of proposal from any faculty at the college. You don't have to be science. I work with people in the humanities pretty frequently. I'll work with you on any size proposal, but I prioritize two kinds of proposals mostly. So one is thinking about really big multi-PPI proposals that require extra support logistically and potentially with writing. So an example of this is the recent Translational Research Excellence Across Disciplines grant that we won from the Department of Education for about $5 million. I helped coordinate that process. I wrote some sections describing capacity at the college. I often am writing people letters of endorsement that are signed by officials at the college. And so I'll help a lot with sort of managing those proposals, and I'll get into those details in a minute. I also prioritize early career faculty proposals. So in addition to running an early career faculty writing club, I'm generally available for one-on-one meetings for pre-tenure faculty. Anyone else is also welcome to come and ask for assistance, but these folks get to the front of the line. And so that's just so you have a sense of how things are prioritized and triaged when things get busy. So I'm going to sort of run you through the various proposal development services that I offer. I can also offer tailored support as needed, so always feel free to reach out to me. My goal is to help you get funding. But what I will say is that there is only one of me. And so if things get busy, the people who entered the queue first are going to get access to services first. And so my I can be the most helpful if you include me very early, right? From planning stages on. If I know something's in the pipeline, if I understand sort of where it is in the process, I can be much more helpful than if you email me the day before your proposal's due and ask for a review. I'm not necessarily going to be able to be particularly helpful. And even if I were to provide you the detailed review, you probably wouldn't have time to respond to that. So I guess the main takeaway, if you get nothing else out of this presentation, is to reach out early and often, and keep me updated on sort of where things are at periodically as you move through the proposal writing process. And so I can help with anything from the very beginning of thinking about how we go through proposals. So I can help you figure out how to use tools like Pivot and Grant Forward. I can help set up searches that may alert you to things that you wouldn't have seen. If I know what your research area is, I'm often looking at opportunities. And so if I know who you are and I know what you work on, and I see something very specific to you, I will often reach out and send you an email. I do this in particular for early career folks that I know. But I'm happy to sort of always keep an eye out. And so it's helpful if we've already spoken a little bit about what kinds of research you do so that I have an idea of who to reach out to on campus. But I'm also happy to really discuss the fit of a solicitation, how whether or not a topic might fit a call, and also have those discussions with program officers, either with you or for you. And so keep those things in mind. I'm happy to talk about sort of framing. In terms of large multi-PI proposals, I'm happy to assist with proposal management. So that's thinking about at the beginning of your proposal, I'll read the RFP or the NOFO or whatever announcement in detail and set up a list of deliverables, a list of subsections. We can work on assigning those deliverables to individual team members, and also I can work with team members to make sure things stay on track. I can also draft a writing schedule for you and help you stick to that schedule. And this can be really helpful, but it's something that has to be done at the very beginning of your proposal writing process. Otherwise, it isn't particularly helpful. I'm happy to do something like that for any proposal in terms of setting up a timeline, setting up writing goals. But I'm not gonna, for example, your R01, I'm not going to, follow up with you to remind you to follow a timeline, but I am happy to help you work on figuring out how to do time management to set an effective timeline. I'm also, where I can be particularly helpful is thinking about institutional information, helping you track down information in collaboration with the Office of Institutional Research, drafting sections about CCNY. I have quite a lot of stock sort of writing about the college that can be helpful when discussing sort of why CCNY is a special place. In particular, talking about our role as an MSI, our role in Harlem, and in partnership with the local community. And so if you have either institutional capacity statements you need to write, letters of endorsement you need, or other details about the college, I'm happy to help you figure out how to craft that into a compelling statement. And I've done that for a variety of proposals already. For writing support, I can't write your proposals for you, with some exceptions. If you are writing a large multi-PI proposal, and I don't have too much on my plate, I am happy to help with specific sections that are more about institutional capacity, especially when it's something that is really on behalf of the college and building capacity at the college. So this big Department of Education grant, for example, I am happy to help draft sections about evaluation, etc. But I can't do that for everyone's proposal. So that is only in relatively specific cases. I am happy to provide templates and trainings for specific proposal sections, especially if you ask for it well in advance. So for example, I ran a Department of Energy promoting inclusive and equitable research plan workshop because that was a new proposal element that people hadn't had experience with before, and we had some requests for sort of expertise in that area. And so, for example, if someone wanted me to run that again, I'm happy to provide those materials or run that workshop again. We recently had a National Science Foundation Broader Impacts Writing workshop in collaboration with the Advancing Research in Society NSF Center. And that was a 2-day workshop in January that involved peer editing, but also a really nice toolkit for writing your broader impact statement. So periodically I do run trainings like this, and if there's a section that you would like a training on, please do feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to develop one for you. That can't be a thing that I develop necessarily in a day, but it's certainly something I can do on a pretty tight timeline. For early career folks in particular, I run an early career writing club. I don't know if any of them are here, but the people who've been in that club can hopefully say that it was useful. Last semester, we really focused on pitching ideas and doing sort of early stage idea alignment with specific funding calls. And then this semester, we're going to focus, so the broader impact writing workshop was part of this, but then this semester, we're really going to focus on craft, thinking about peer editing, thinking about how you write an effective statement or narrative. And so if that's something you're interested in and you're pre-tenure, please do reach out to me, and I'm happy to include you in those emails. And then I think something that I can be particularly helpful with is providing actual review on your writing. So I offer essentially 3 kinds of review. The first is early stage, and I actually think this is the most useful, although you do have to be a little bit proactive. So if you send me a draft that is incomplete or very rough, even if it's an outline, I'm happy to provide feedback on focus, on messaging, on whether the sort of aims align with sponsor goals, and talk about big picture strengths and weaknesses, thinking strategically about how to frame your proposal. I say allow 2 weeks for review. That is sort of at my most busy. I can often turn things around quicker, but I can't guarantee a faster turnaround necessarily, right? So I encourage you to reach out and ask me sort of when I think I would be able to get something, or if you have a deadline in mind, let me know, and I can let you know if I can actually meet that or not. It helps if I know something's coming, because then I can hold time for it, so if you let me know 2 weeks in advance, hey, I'm going to send you something, I'm going to need a turnaround within 4 days, but I'm going to send it to you on this date, and you stick to that, I can hold time in my schedule to make sure that I have time to review. So always keep that in mind. As long as you let me know something's coming in the pipeline, I can make sure that I'm holding time for that in my schedule. I also offer what I call late stage review, where this is where you still have considerable time to revise your proposal, but I can focus more on having a draft on your draft that has sort of complete fleshed out ideas. I'm thinking about craft, the effectiveness of your writing, what are sort of the strengths and weaknesses of the proposal? Do you align with review criteria, and where might your weaknesses be in terms of aligning with review criteria? And I can also give you feedback on writing, style, structure, and flow, thinking about where you want to move things in the proposal and how it might be more effective to sort of change the flow. The final thing that I can do is I can do final proofing. So I can do like a final read through just to check that things make sense. I am not a copy editor. That is not my training, although I've copy edited my own work. And so I will say that if I can't guarantee that I'm going to catch every single typo, but I am happy to be a second set of eyes and do some final polishing. Additionally, I will say I want to go back to institutional information. So not only can I sort of develop statements here, but I can also often help you do visualization. So if there is, I'm a computational biologist by training, I'm pretty handy in R. If you have data that you'd like help thinking about how you can design a more sort of effective graphic, I'm helpful in that as well. I'm going to pause for questions because I see one from Ruth. Yeah, thinking about CUNY-wide information. So that's a really good question. I can't guarantee that I'm always going to be able to get that information, but I can help you try. And that's sort of what I will always say about institutional information is if there's sort of hurdles in the way, I can help you I can reach out on your behalf to people and try to get access to some of that information and figure out who needs to be asked. But the problem that often exists for CUNY information, particularly when it refers to the graduate center, is that they don't really maintain that information on a college by college level, which makes it really hard to get summaries about, for example, students in the graduate center who are at City College. And so I can push them for that, but I can't necessarily always get it if they don't have it. And so, I do know people in CUNY Central. I think we all do at this point. And I may be able to sort of reach out and try to help you. Again, if there's data that you need, I can help you figure out who needs to be asked, and I can potentially, ask a bunch of people for you. But with data requests, that can often take longer because we're relying on other people to provide us with that data. And so I encourage people to get in contact with me early and let me know what specific data they're going to need, because then I can try to help them track that down. But yeah, I think in general, if you let me know that you need something, I can, at a minimum, try to figure out who we ask and try to push on that and figure out an answer for you. I can't guarantee that that will always be possible, but within the constraints of the CUNY system, I'm always happy to do that. All right. One thing I highlighted this early career writing club, but I want to just highlight it again. This is a pretty low intensity writing club. So I'll mention in a slide or two about the career bootcamp and the Grants 101 bootcamp that Linda Vigdor runs at the ASRC. Those are great early career opportunities that are very intensive and really will get your writing in shape. This writing club is meant to be somewhat different. It's a pretty low intensity engagement. We meet every 2 weeks. If you can't make a week, that's okay. It's an opportunity to network with other pre-tenure faculty, meet some people outside of your department, but also get some feedback on your writing and on your ideas from a really multidisciplinary group. But it is designed to accommodate a variety of levels of engagement, and so you can kind of get as much in as out as you put in. And so this shouldn't be, hopefully, too much of a stressor and should hopefully be mostly helpful for folks. If you're interested in this club, just email me and I am happy to add you to our planning stuff. And you should have, if you are pre-tenure and you haven't been getting a bunch of emails from me, especially last semester, that means you're missing from my pre-tenure faculty list, and you should send me an email just so I can add you to that, because I do send out periodic opportunities for pre-tenure folks alone. I should note that I'm not the only research development person within CUNY. So previously, CCNY had a director of research development and me in charge of proposal development. Alan recently left, so it's just me here. But RF CUNY offers a variety of pre-proposal support services. They have webinars that they hold regularly, but they also offer a proposal peer review program. And that's essentially where you send your complete proposal in, and they have an anonymous panel of faculty from CUNY review your proposal and provide feedback. And from people who've done that, I've heard very positive things. You do have to get everything in gear pretty early. So you want to be, I would recommend trying to actually finish your proposals much earlier than you think, so that you can take advantage of that service, because I do think it is really valuable to get peer review in that way before sending it to the sponsor. I will also, once again, advertise that Linda Vigdor's, I think her career bootcamp is open right now. I think they may still be taking, or at least they were last week, but you'll have to check their website yourself. But the Grants 101 bootcamp and the career bootcamps are both really valuable opportunities, especially if you're trying to write a career grant. All right, so I'm going to move into, so those are essentially the services that I can provide. And if you didn't see something there that you might need help with, just email me and I can, troubleshoot with you to figure out whether I'm the best person to provide those services or someone else, and also help you locate opportunities. Okay, so I'm reading Ruth's question. Sometimes we seek information from individual team members that may be available in the grants office, from the RF, from the post-info, through the registrar, etc. Is it possible to minimize the hurting of faculty cats, or at least send them information with an option to check it? I think that really depends on the kind of information, because we may not be able to provide it directly if it's something that's privileged on the side of the faculty, right? It may be, we can provide you with your own information, but unless a faculty member is going to consent to us, checking that, we may not be able to do it otherwise. That being said, we can probably come up with something that would get us consent. If it's proposal data, Yeah, I'll do that. It also depends on the kind of data. So if it's proposal or funding or expenditure data, I can often help you with that. For stuff that Nikisha has in terms of demographics, there may be some restrictions on how that can be shared and how she maintains that. And so that's something we'd have to have a conversation with her about. But if it's grants office stuff, then I can definitely help you figure that out. And especially I can send it to faculty and ask them to opt in. That's something I could do. So if it's stuff that I have access to, I could certainly send them an email and say, hey, are you okay with me sharing this? Check this box. And then if I can get that checked box, then I could compile it for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just speak up for a moment. I'm thinking of, as you probably recall, we needed to tabulate the annual direct costs of people's grants.
Mhm.
And, you know, I don't even think they were reluctant, but sometimes they don't respond, or sometimes they give the wrong answer because
Yeah.
they don't know that. Anyway, stuff like that, where if you had it all in the same format, you know how to
Yep.
get that information, but I don't know if that's considered confidential. So just as an example.
I think for something like that, I would want the faculty member to opt in, right? I
Okay.
wouldn't feel comfortable providing that without asking them, but
Yeah.
I could certainly get those numbers, send them to them, and then say, hey, are you okay with me sending this to Ruth?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay. I mean,
and
that at least would be a step forward, because then
yeah,
they don't have to look it up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's pretty easy to do. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then I mean that might be, depending on what kind of data, I can also have a conversation with the associate provost or the dean, depending on who's involved with a specific proposal, and they may say that's actually okay to share for something like GRISE, but I'd have to ask first. Like, I just can't say right now. It would depend on the kind of data.
Okay, so it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst is the answer is no. And
Exactly.
we're
Yeah.
back where we started from. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just send me an email and I'm happy to try to figure it out. Um, cool. So I want to talk about timelines. Thinking about So we've talked about services. Think about should you be reaching out to me to begin taking advantage of some of these services. This is the timeline, the minimal timeline to get stuff submitted, right? The idea is that you should be submitting a PARS request at a minimum of 10 business days to GSP before your submission, with your budget before 5 business days, right? And you should be submitting a couple business days in advance. Um, I would say it's much better, especially with a PARS request, if you can submit the PARS months in advance so that GSP knows that something is coming. So as soon as you know you're going to make a submission, you should be letting GSP know that they're going to be getting something so that they can work with you throughout. And also, you probably want to have a final budget actually well in advance of this timeline, just to make things easier. The earlier you can get stuff to them, the more helpful they can be, and the easier their job is. If you start trying to submit things on the day that they're due, there's a real potential that you may not be able to make that happen, or it will require sort of a big lift on their part. I think it's important that people remember that we are staff, and so we have, a work schedule that begins at 9 and ends at 5 for most of us. And so while faculty may be working on the weekends or in the evenings, that does not mean that we are necessarily required to as staff. And so keep that in mind when you think about the timelines that you're submitting on, is that someone is going to need to submit on your behalf. And if you're trying to do that outside of working hours, that's not going to work. I would suggest this as your timeline, actually, is that as early as possible, you are locating your RFP, right? Once you've sort of located the thing that you want to apply for, you should submit that proposal assistance request, the PARS. And this should be hopefully months in advance. And then immediately contact me for any writing support that you'll need. We can have a meeting and discuss sort of what sorts of things you might need, and I can let you know what I'll be able to do and what I might not be able to do. And I may have to check on a certain number of things. If you can write and finish early enough, that means that you can schedule this mock panel review through our CUNY's program, but it also means you can send multiple versions of your proposal to me for feedback. And so if you really want to take advantage of peer review and review from our office, you're going to have to send that to us a little bit early. right? And then in terms of having your final budget and your final proposal for submission, don't leave this until last minute. And especially if you can get in some of the documents that are more technical out of the way early, that's going to lessen sort of the load on GSP. So for example, if you can get your bio sketches in well in advance, that's one less thing they'll have to look at as you're preparing the other proposal elements. So I've seen faculty sometimes say, oh, I'll get that in after I finish the narrative. I would actually recommend, as much as possible, getting in all those documents as early as possible so then you can focus on getting the narrative done and other things. All right. Hopefully this is not a new timeline to people, especially if you are submitting grants, you should be aware of GSP's timelines and processes. All right. Do we have any, if there's any questions, again, please post them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them as they come up. The rest of the talk today, we'll probably be finished a little bit early, is I'm going to talk you through the limited submission process and what that looks like. And then I'll talk a little bit about Pivot. Many times, you probably get a decent amount of emails from our Associate Provost, Taranajit Ghosh, or from Rose Wesson earlier. These emails say, you can apply for this. City College has X number of slots that we can submit, right? So these are proposals where the sponsor has said, essentially, you can submit one proposal per college, or you can submit two proposals per college. And so if there are multiple faculty who want to submit to these opportunities, we internally have to figure out a way to be fair in deciding who gets to submit. And so this is sort of the process that we follow that involves an internal competition. So we'll announce a limited submission opportunity, and we'll say, hey, there's 2 slots. You will express interest through a web form. It's a Google form that's on the bottom of every announcement. You can click it and you can decide, you can fill out your information. The expression of interest is not, we don't really pay a ton of attention to the expression of interest other than to know how many people are interested in submitting. So that tells us if we need to have an internal competition. It lets us know if the people who are interested in submitting are actually submitting something that is relevant to the proposal. So if it's not relevant, then we can reach out and say, hey, maybe this isn't the right opportunity for you. But it also allows us to see opportunities for collaboration. So if there's 2 people submitting essentially the same idea, we might email both of them and say, hey, would you mind if we shared your idea with another faculty member who's also interested in sharing? Maybe there's an opportunity for you to collaborate. But you don't need, the expression of interest should not be a giant lift. We're not having anyone rate your expression of interest generally, except in rare cases where we will let you know that that is happening. Once you have submitted your expression of interest by the deadline, if we need to hold an internal competition because many faculty are interested in an opportunity, I will reach out to you with a white paper template that you will have to follow closely to write a white paper that will then be peer reviewed to determine who can submit. So this white paper you'll have usually about a week, sometimes a week and a half to write, but generally a lot of these limited submission opportunities have really fast turnarounds, and so we can't let them sit too long because we want to make sure that we chose someone who can then go on to write a really good proposal and have time to do that. And then we'll do peer review. We provide faculty with a pretty standardized rubric for doing peer review. And the final decision is going to rest with the Associate Provost for Research, depending on college priorities. If there's disagreements, usually we stick with essentially the ranking from reviewers, but reviewers don't always agree with each other. And so then we'll select candidates and let you know, and then we expect that you submit a PARS as soon as possible, and that you will submit a final proposal. It's very important that if you change your mind about submission, you let us know so someone else can have that spot. If we find out that you didn't let us know, but you didn't submit the final proposal, that could mean that you get disqualified from engaging with this process in the future. All right, so we need to know that the people who are taking the spots are actually going to reliably use them for these proposals. And we often do have high competition for a number of calls each year that many faculty are interested in. So we want to make sure that's going to someone who will actually submit. All of this information is available on the website. We have a full policy written out now, and that was only posted recently, but I would encourage you to go check out that policy. It will have a lot more detail than what I just talked about. If you ever encounter a limited submission opportunity that has not had an announcement made, we don't announce every single opportunity. We mostly announce ones we think will be interesting to faculty. Occasionally we miss one. Um, the procedure that you should follow is to email me as soon as possible, and I will send out an announcement and solicit opportunities for that competition. Um, you should do that as soon as possible. I will say that if you submit your expression of interest late, or if you submit a white paper late, you will be disqualified from the competition. That includes up to, if it's 5 minutes late, it's late. We are pretty strict about deadlines because we want to run a fair process for all faculty engaging. And so if you are late, just know that you can get mad at me, but that's not going to help. White papers in general tend to do better if you've already contacted your program officer, and everything tends to go better if you've already contacted your program officer and asked them about whether the proposal is fit. So I always recommend doing that if you want to sort of highlight why your work would be particularly good for a call on your white paper. This process can be modified on a case-by-case basis. There are some calls that are better submitted at the college level, right, in line with college priorities than by individual faculty. And when that's the case, we may decide not to hold a competition, but we may invite faculty into the sort of brainstorming process for a specific call as well. So keep in mind that at the discretion of the Associate Provost for Research, this process can be modified. But in general, we will follow the policies on this website. All right, if you have any questions about limited submissions, again, post them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. The last thing I want to talk about is people often ask how they find opportunities. And so, I think your professional network should be a good source of finding opportunities, frankly, but also I'm happy to help you locate things. But if you just want to sort of search or keep tabs on what's happening in general, I recommend, if you haven't already started using Pivot, to start now. This is an online database that City College pays for you to have access to of grants, and it's pretty easy to use. So you can search for funding opportunities using keywords. So for example, I might put microbial ecology, bioinformatics, genomics, metagenomics for the things I study. So I would use relatively specific search terms, or I might say, climate change, environmental studies, right? So there's a variety of search terms you could use. And you might want to set up multiple searches, but one of the nice things that you can do is save your searches and have the results emailed to you on a weekly basis. So every Sunday, it'll email you every single grant opportunity in environmental science. And their advanced search features are quite advanced, actually. So there's quite a lot you can do in terms of filtering, excluding terms, etc., setting areas, specific funders you're interested in, things like that. And so I highly recommend setting up a number of saved searches that get emailed to you every Sunday and just keeping tabs that way. You can also set up a profile where you give them, I think, your org ID or a list of publications and your CV, and they will magically generate a list of suggestions for you using their internal algorithms that they think would be appropriate. Anecdotally, I've heard that the My Profile feature, while it's getting better, is not always as tailored as setting up your own searches for your interests. So I might encourage you to do a combination of both. But the My Profile feature will also allow you to have them periodically email you relevant opportunities. I'm not going to get into more detailed documentation for Pivot because I don't think that's particularly helpful for this venue. But I will say that there's quite a lot of documentation on Pivot, and there's also some documentation on our website. If you go to it, the Office of Research has a Pivot page. And so I recommend looking at that documentation, although I think Pivot's pretty straightforward in terms of how to use it. If you're not used to doing advanced Google searches, you may want to read up on some of their advanced search features as well. Yeah, and so I guess with that, I'll just highlight that, we run a variety of trainings all the time. My job is really a combination of providing trainings and then also providing tailored support. Although I find that I think faculty get the most out of that tailored support for some of these larger calls. if there's something in particular that you want from our office, always feel free to email me and I can see if it fits into our schedule. Or if we think that it'll serve a large enough fraction of faculty to go through with it. But yeah, we're still developing the role and I'm happy to always answer questions. That's all I had to say. Okay. I'll hang out for the next like 10 minutes or so until people filter out if they have questions, but people should feel free to hop out if they feel like they learned everything they need. Okay. Stop sharing. Yvette, I think that's probably, it doesn't seem like anyone has questions, so I'm gonna log off unless there's anything else you need from me.